Hi, this is Mark Galeotti with another little rumination on Russian politics, but obviously this one, the end of year one, looking ahead to 2018. The year in which I should mention, in April or May, depending on whether you're in the UK or the US, my book, Vori, Russia's Super Mafia, comes out from Yale University Press, one definitely to look out for. But there are other important things happening in 2018 too. And when it comes to Russia, I really want to just pick up on four specific ones, just to take a look at what we might see. First of all, politics. Obviously, we have the elections. And equally, obviously, Putin is going to win. That is not what 2018's politics is going to be all about. Or rather, shall I say, the elections are going to be more than anything else a symptom rather than anything else. The issue is going to be about succession. That's what it's all going to be, and it's going to be that for years until it's sorted. Although it sounds ridiculous, this is a very, very slow-burning crisis that is a truly systemic one. Putin, firstly, probably doesn't want to continue ruling, but even if he does, in due course, health, mortality and boredom will eventually take their toll. And it's clear that both he and the system itself are going to be thinking about what a post-Putin Russia is going to be like. So he'll be looking for a successor and maybe some kind of constitutional tweaks that allow him to maintain a role which gives him security and some degree of authority over the political system without the tedious necessity of actually running it. But as I said, this is not going to be an easy thing to sort out, especially because increasingly what we might see are Putin's own interests and those of the elite themselves beginning to diverge. Second point, the World Cup. I'm not the greatest fan of sports, you would never believe it, but this is actually going to be really quite important, just as actually the Winter Olympics were. But more so because the Winter Olympics took place, after all, before the invasion of Crimea and the intervention into the Donbass. And therefore they were part of a sort of a generalised, for want of a better word, charm campaign. Well, the World Cup clearly is taking place in a very, very different world, a much more confrontational world. And it's one in which clearly the Russians are going to try and mobilise this for all they're worth, to demonstrate, firstly, that they can make things happen. Despite all the problems with the stadia being built and so forth, I think if Sochi taught us anything, it's that when this state really wants to focus efforts and make it clear what's important to it, things will get done. So on the whole, I suspect they are going to be successful games. The question is whether it's going to be a successful political gambit. Do people therefore think, oh gosh, actually Russia is more like us than we thought? Because it is. It is not actually this Mordorian evil empire on the outskirts of civilization. It may well have a distinctly unpleasant regime in power, but Russia itself is essentially a European country. Or is this actually going to become the focus for yet more conflict, which it may well be. I mean, firstly, we're going to see more Western journalists in Russia than there have been at any time since 1917, I understand. And obviously they're accredited to go and write about the World Cup. But I can't help but feel that while they're there, they might be doing one or two other things. And it's very much a question of how, obviously, that plays out, but also how Russia responds to it. Russia's reflexes at the moment, its instincts, are particularly unpleasant and often counterproductively stupid. So how we see that plays out, I think this is actually one of these things which could, however, my apologies, football fans, trivial the World Cup may actually be in geopolitical terms, it could actually prove to be quite significant as a sort of a catalyst for opinion, one way or the other. So that'll be remain to be seen. Third point is essentially the whole active measures campaign that is clearly the thing that is consuming the West at the moment. Now, it's not going to go away. We're going to continue to see it almost as essentially as a kind of a low-level interference campaign throughout. But I think what we probably will see is it becoming much more focused. Let's be perfectly honest, a lot of their measures have actually been, at best, mixed and at worst, distinctly counterproductive. I think what we're going to see instead is more of an awareness of the need to actually identify some likely positive outcome. So yes, there will be a continuing stream of small-scale disinformation and subversion campaigns that generally undermine Western democracy and faith in the liberal democratic model, and also generally to encourage splits and divisions. But I think they will focus more on areas and countries where they think they actually have some positive outcomes that are likely. The Balkans I'm particularly worried about. I think the Balkans is going to become a sort of a new focus for, shall we say, a new great game. And to an extent, let's be honest, the West has neglected the Balkans quite a bit. It seems to take vicious internecine wars to really get us concerned. So we're going to have to sort of pick up on a lot of ground there. But also, I think it's a question of other countries that happen to become focuses for particularly unpleasant and divisive politics could well become areas where the Russians will seek to stoke it up. So we might see that with Hungary, we might well see that with Poland. It's possible, depending on how Brexit emerges, that we might actually see the UK also becoming something of a hub, but we'll remain to see. But I think the key thing is this. Whereas before there was almost a sense of anywhere and everywhere is fair game, I think now for the real serious operations, we're going to see them being a little bit more careful, a little bit more focused in where they go. And the fourth point, Ukraine. Yeah, nothing much, I'm afraid. I don't see there being any grounds for any kind of progress. The Minsk II process has long been dead, and I don't see Minsk III or something else coming in any meaningful way to replace it. I don't see the Russians being able or willing to make more advances, but nor do I think that the Ukrainian government is in a position to change things either. Unfortunately, certainly so long as Putin is in the Kremlin, I think what we see is to a large extent what we get. But there might be some opportunities to scale down some of the actual violence, which would be a good thing. It was nice to see the prisoner exchange taking place. But in essence, we have a kind of frozen conflict, understanding that frozen conflicts can also be quite violent ones as well. So those are my four sort of key areas, I think, to be looking at. Though, of course, Russia always surprises us in good ways and bad. But broadly speaking, I think I want to end by saying that we need to recognise the extent to which this is not a crisis situation. We focus on what might change, on what might be actually the crucial issues. And I think that actually omits to consider the fact that, look, in economic terms, Russia's not doing great, but it's not doing badly. It's basically a middle, low-income European country in that respect. In political terms, yes, there's a massive question about sort of Putin's succession and so forth, but broadly speaking, the majority of the population, they are either happy or grumbling, but frankly, relatively content with the situation. These are not, on the whole, people who will go out on the streets and certainly not take on the National Guard and the FSB to do so. Socially, generally, there may be concerns about the long-term demographic and social change. There is clearly considerable low-level social protest. But again, we're not talking about the imminence of Bund, the imminence of explosions of violence and so forth. When it comes down to it, the key issues with this system are two. One is the red, white and blue Tsar Putin, and the whole issue of his potential succession, and the extent to which even just the increasingly open discussion about that actually has a destabilising factor on his rule and the system as a whole. And secondly, black swan events. This is one of my key things. I think much like actually the old Soviet Union, this is a system which actually lacks considerable levels of resilience. Thank God we have not yet had some terrible conflagration like Chernobyl. But if there was some, for example, truly major terrorist attack, some natural or man-made disaster, or something else that actually provided a real systemic shock, I'm not at all comfortable that this is a system that has the social and political reserves, let alone the economic ones, to cope with that. But let's be honest, that can be said about many systems. At the moment, I'm expecting 2018 to have a lot of exciting things for pundits and know-it-alls like me to talk about, but I'm not expecting this coming year to see any dramatic change. But on the other hand, I think it is going to be part of a process in which we increasingly see the contours of the discussions and the processes which will lead to quite significant change. So change is coming, but probably not in the next 12 months. Thanks very much and have a wonderful 2018.